Okay, so sorry, my resolution has changed because working with an older projector, it's not exactly taking the higher resolution. But so we are going to cover the last if statements, that concept, and I have some example for you to look at. We're going to talk about logical operators. This is crucial in programming, and once you learn how to do in C++, the other languages are very similar. And then we are going to do a menu with switch statement. Switch statement in C++ is similar to what you see in Java, but in Python, there's no switch statement. You just simply create different function for each switch. But we'll talk about these today, and you can use Visual Studio or your online compiler to be able to work on your lab exercises. Maybe I'll do one set of lights. All right. So today we're gonna look at if, else, if, right? We talked about if, else, nested in if, else, where we left off with the assignment last week, on Tuesday, I'm sorry. So we know that the if statement, it would check for the condition inside the parentheses. If that is true, then it's gonna execute the body. Now, if it's not, it's going to go to the next block. So the else if the first condition, condition 1 in the if statement is false, then it's going to pick up in the else if. The compiler is going to go there. And it's going to check the next condition, which is condition 2. Now, it would only execute the code if both condition, if the condition 1 is false and the condition 2 is true. Unlike the nested else if, right? You would see that, but it's similar. Now, you would see this quite a bit in parallel with Java, and in Python, it actually use a different keyword like elif instead of else if. So if the first condition is false and the second condition is true, then the code is executed there. Okay, and then it's going to forget about everything following that, and it's going to pick up in the next, after the rest of the block, it's going to go to the next part of the program. Now, if this is not true, if both of the conditions is not true, it's going to go to the next else if, and it's going to check for condition 3, right? So if both condition 1 and condition 2 is false, then it's going to check if condition 3 is true. And after that, if it is true, then it's going to execute the code here, okay? Now, this is used quite a bit in analytics and also in decision-making, as you know, for algorithm that you see in automation. We have many different applications outside of that, right? And then if all of those conditions are not met, then it's going to go to the else and execute the else. So if condition 1, 2, and 3 are false, then it's going to kick it over to the else, which is the last part of that statement. And so basically it does sequential evaluation, and it's sequential evaluation regardless what you see, right? So the conditions are checked, and keep in mind that when you write it, the condition needs to be in the parentheses, okay? And then you always going to have the curly brace to include that code block. Now it talks about exclusive execution. So if the condition evaluates true, then the block of that condition is executed and the rest it's going to forget, okay? And then we only add the option else to cover in the case of all the conditions are not met. So that way we would have a more conclusive branch in our program. Okay, so in example 1, you can add this to your online compiler or Visual Studio. So we have a score, maybe from a student, it's 85. And we want to check if that score is going to give us a letter grade A, B, C, D. There's no D here, but or F, right? So now notice that in this program, actually, I need to fix that. Sorry. You can take out all the STD because I had left one of the STD there. I changed it to using namespace STD. Otherwise, you just have C out with the STD colon in the front. Okay, so there's a modify in that. So you need to remove the STD there. So when we have this program, let me go to my project. So if you add this program to your editor, right? The only fix we have is just make sure that we remove this STD on line 17. Okay, so we have it in main. We initialize the score as 85 for the user. Now, this is hard coding. Sorry, the projector is really hard to see, right? Maybe, let me see if I can change this to a different look. Like maybe if I modify the property or something to the white. Well, maybe not. It doesn't let you. I'll use the other compiler next, I guess. Okay, so as you look at the code, you would see that this is not an input, right? This is something that we hard code in. You initialize it at 85. So when you run it, it should tell you that the letter grade is a B. Now, for the exercise that we need to do, we have a similar program, but you are going to have a C in. So you are going to prompt the user to enter a quiz score. And from there, you are going to implement the if statement to display the letter grade. Okay, so basically you're making a grade calculator. And so an A is going to be 90 and above. A B is going to be 80 and above. The C is 70 and above. The D is 60 and above. And the F is from 0 to 59. Now, there are other ways to implement range in grades. And so, but this is one of the simplest way to implement if-else if statement. So your condition, similar to what you see in the example. So all you have to do is you are going to remove the 85, right? And then you are going to have a C in to score, okay? So I will show you my code. I'm gonna, sorry. Let me put it on the other compiler because it's white and on the back because I don't think I can change this unless you know how, but that's probably better for you to see, I think, right? So if you use one compiler, it's white background. For now, because of the projector, I'm just gonna. So just like what you see in the example, right? I have a C out, which is to prompt the user to enter the quiz score. And that's inside the main. Now and you can keep it score as a variable name or quiz score. This is what I use. So we just have include IO stream using namespace std. Inside the main, we have a variable to store our quiz score. And then we have a cout, enter your quiz score. And then we have a cin. It's going to store the input into the variable that we created or we define. And then if you want, you can display what they have entered, but technically it should be able to output that. And then I have an if statement. If quiz score is greater or equal to 90, make sure we have a curly brace for the body. We're going to cout grade A, very close to the example that we see. Else if quiz score is greater or equal to 80, again, the curly brace for the else if body, we're going to display that is grade B. And then in following, sorry, it's not clean. Yeah, so technically, I want to keep it in a separate line. So, okay, that's better. Because I don't want to confuse you. So yeah, make sure that you close the curly brace for the if and the else if body. So I have B is when the score is greater or equal to 80. We're gonna display grade B by doing a cout. And then I have else if quiz score is greater or equal to 70, that will be grade C. So if you use the example program, all you have to do is you're going to add the grade D. And then I have an else if, right? Anything that's greater than 0. So technically when it reached 59, because it's going to check for 60 here. So anything that's greater than 0, that's going to be F. So between 0 and 59, that's going to be the F. And then else, we want to have an invalid input. So if they happen to punch in a negative number, right, we're going to tell them that they need to re-enter their score. So this is a way, and in the textbook or in the PowerPoint, it talks about input validation. There are many ways to validate your input. So you can just control it this way. So that way, if they're trying to put in a negative score, which is, it's not realistic, right? Then it's going to show that it is invalid input. So in this case, we're using if, else if, else if, else if, else if, and else. And then you can run your program and see if you have the output, but you have to test it with a score. Oh, let me see. It says I have an error, so. Oh, it's just timing out on this compiler. But anyway, you can use the other one. So I'll try to see if I can run it again. Not good. So it works, it just it's not responding on the shell. I'm only using it to show you the editor because it's easier to see. Any question regarding the if, else, if statements? So if when you enter your score, let's say if I put in 95, right? It's going to check for that's true. It's going to display grade A and it's going to forget about everything else. But if I enter the score 82, it's going to check false for the 90 grade, and it's going to kick it over to the next condition, which is right here. And it's saying, oh, 82 is greater than 80. It's going to display the grade B. And it's going to forget everything else. So, and you can try the invalid input. You can try to put in like a negative score and see if it's going to check for true or false. Okay. Now we can do more with the grade calculator. So do you have to do if else if this way? No, right? There are many ways to approach the problem and solve it, but at this level, this is what you would see, how people write the program with the conditional statement. And keep all your function in the main. Make sure we do a return 0 and then have a closing brace. And in the other, in most editor, when you click on the curly brace, it's going to pair up. So just make sure that when you open a curly brace, there's always a closing curly brace. Any questions? You need any help? Okay, pretty easy. Now you know how to do a grade calculator, right? To show the letter grade. So I do this with my assembly class, which is CIS-11, but they program at low level. So you would see that when it branches at the higher programming language at the low level, it's a little different. It's all basically mathematics, computer mathematics. So
Can you please scroll down, Bill?
so scroll down?
Yeah.
Okay. Mhm. And you can use the example program. You can add the else if for the grade D and then modify the F. And then you can add in the else for invalid input. So if everything else, so if I put in a -4 for my points, right, it's going to go to the else statement and it's going to output invalid input. Now, you don't have to do if else if like this, but it's ideal, right? Some students, I've seen them just use regular if else and nest it. Also, when you have a lot of conditions like this, when you nest it too deep, a lot of the times it slows down the actual compiler. So technically we should do else if like this, right? But like I said, everybody solves the problems a little differently. Is it completely wrong if you do it the other way? No, right? Uh, any questions? So in the upper classes, they will probably make you do a project and then you have to implement these things to make sure that you understand the concept. And I would recommend that you keep all records of your project that can be part of your portfolio because nowadays when you apply for programming job, they want to see what you have done. So over time, and you can also see your progression. And you can use GitHub to be able to do that. So if I am going to be with you until the end of the semester, I will spend some time to talk to you about GitHub later. But when you take programming classes, a lot of the professor, especially the university professor, if you haven't used GitHub yet, right, maybe watch YouTube tutorial on how to get started with it. And it is a good way to kind of share your source code to the community and be able to build out your application over time. Okay. So when we complete that test and run the program, I just need you to screenshot and add it to your exercise before you submit, right? That it shows that you code and you have a successful output. Okay, so after exercise 1, we are gonna look at programmatic flags. And when I looked through the PowerPoint, and the content of the book. They didn't really go too much in depth about it, but it's a pretty cool concept to really understand. You can definitely use the flag to apply to what we've been doing, and you're gonna see some example program and the program we're gonna be doing using programmatic flags. And it uses integer type and also that's Boolean for true and false. Okay. Um, basically, bool flag is going to allow us to check for something that is true or something that is false. Like, for example, let's say that you have a lot of data to be input and you want to check the numbers to see if they're even or odd, right? You can specify on how it would check the condition. Now, this one is going to require you to understand a little bit about truth table, which we'll talk about logical operators next, right? So in this part, it shows you an example, right? There's a variable called found even number, and it's initialized as false. And the computer, when it sees the value false, it indicates that as a 0. Right? Because it's only understanding binary 0 or 1. Now you can set it for true. When you set it for true, if you want to check if that condition is true. Let's say if I input the number 22, right? And it wants to match for true, then when we type in the value as true, the computer would know that it is 1. So how does it check, right? So when you look at this example program, we have the same header file and using namespace std. We have a variable called int number. So number is the name and it accepts integer. And in this case, we are going to use a flag called is even, right? So basically you create a variable and you type it as bool for Boolean. And we want to use this to check to see if the input from the user is an even number. So we will prompt the user to enter an integer. And we are going to record that input into the variable called number. Once that's done, it's going to use the AND operator. This is a logical operator that uses gates at the low level, okay? So this is the, and I put in some of the table later on and you can see. So we're gonna have an if condition. If the number is input and it ends it with the 1, the least significant bit, if it's odd, if it's a 1, then it's odd, okay? Else, if it ends it with the 1 and if the outcome is 0, then it is even. So how can I check this manually without having to run this program? I'm going to show you how. If you open up your calculator on your Windows system and you click on the ellipse at the top, the 3 lines, and you select programmer. Okay, the programmer mode is going to allow you to work with binary, decimal, hexadecimal, and octal numbers. These are computer numbers. Okay. Now, on right below it, you would see that there's a bitwise menu option. These are going to be allowing the computer to apply the gates or the logical operator for the value. So let's assume, right? We're just going to make an example. You see the DEC here, that's the decimal number. That's our human counting number, the number that you learn in math classes, okay? So let's say that if I have a number 7, which you know that is an odd number, right? And I select bitwise and I click on and we're going to AND it with the 1. So 7 and 1 is not 7 plus 1. 7 converts to binary, which is what you see here, right? The 7 value that we see in math, in counting number, the computer converts it to these binary value. And then, so if you AND it with a 1, and you press equal, right, it shows you a 1. So if the result is 1, then it is an odd number, right? That's what the program says, right? So if the least significant bit is 1, then it is an odd number. Now let's test it. If you have the decimal number 8, and if we select the logical operator and we AND it with the 1, you get a 0, okay? So this is a way, there's multiple ways to check odd or even number. You can also use mod, but at the simplest level, we can use a logical operator like AND to be able to check, which applies the truth table, true or false, right? 0 is false and 1 is true. Hence the bool option in your flag, okay? So if I enter the number 8 in decimal, I click DEC and type in 8, and then I click bitwise and click and I select the 1, then my outcome is going to be 0. And if you take my discrete structure class, you will know how to do this manually, right? But a quick way is to check with your programmer calculator. Okay, so when we write this program, it's going to check to see if the number is even, and it's simply applying the logical operator and the number 1 in value, okay? Else, right, if it's even, that's true, then the outcome is 0. And then you can display the number and you can run that program, okay? So below it, I show you the information. So this is the truth table, which takes us to the next part of the actual concept. So you see this again. So when you have the AND operator, anytime that you have the 0 in the mix as an input, then the outcome is going to be 0. Okay. So earlier you saw, right, in my programmer calculator here, I have the number 7, right? This is the binary value. So 1 and 1 is going to be 1. Okay. So if I take a 1 and it with a 1, because the 1 right here is the least significant bit, that's the most right bit of that particular byte. Okay, so the right bit is the lowest value. That's a 1. It's because it's a 7 converted to these binary values. So if I take this one and it with the 1, I get a 1, right? But if you have a decimal number 8, you see how the binary value, the least significant bit is a 0. So the rule is that anytime if you have an input that has a 0, then your outcome is a 0. Okay, so that's how it's able to apply the logical AND to determine if it's an odd or an even number. And even you can check if I have a decimal 10, right, which is an even number, you see? So even number, the least significant bit is always going to be a 0. Okay? Because the least significant bit, the equivalence of this in binary is a 1 here for that decimal. Okay, any question? Okay. So we are going to prompt the user to enter an integer, right? Similar to what you see in the example program. You are going to use the flag variable and bitwise operator with the conditional statement to check to see if it's an odd number, right? So in the opposite, what we'll do is we will flag it for odd. So you would say is odd as a variable, right? And then we can say true, else, right, is odd, false. So it's just the opposite. Or if you use it in this case, you can use it exactly like this, but this one checks for even. So I'll show you my program. Sorry, let me go to this one. I'll paste it onto maybe Word so I can zoom in better. Okay, so here's my program. I have IOStream for header file using namespace std. I have a main function. I use the same thing, so int number, right? But my flag variable is going to be is odd because I'm checking for an odd value from the input. And first, I will prompt the user to input their number. So I have a cout, enter an integer. And I would record that input into the variable that I created at the top, which is int number. So cin, and that's going to put in number, very similar to your example program. And I still use the same logical operator. So if number and 1, if that's true, right, then we're going to output that is an odd number. So it's going to do the LSB and 1, least significant bit. Else, we would have else is odd false, and that will be an even number. Okay, so you can modify the variable up a little bit so that way it really implies the purpose of the program, but we're just going to go the opposite. And so then we're going to have another if statement. It says, so once we check if that's true, right, we're going to say if is odd, then we're going to cout it is an odd number. Else, the number is an even number. So you can use Boolean flag and conditional statement to be able to implement the branch of your program on how it would determine, right? So we can do this for analytics purposes. We can do this for, even consumer applications or business applications. And then lastly, after the else, you just need to do return 0 and have your closing curly brace and run the program. And you can test it, right? So manually in the back, you can check and simply just applying the AND operator, it checks the most right bit on that byte. So, and it ended with the 1. So I see a lot of students submit odd and even program in my classes, and a lot of the time they use mod, which apply divisions, right? And division is just iteration of subtraction. But this is another approach that you would see. So, you know, you might have interview questions for programming jobs where they ask you to do these things, right? Like they give you a set of data and you have to you have to create a program that picks out the number that represents odd or even. And this is another way to do it. Okay, so you can define your flag variable and then use it simply, you know, initializing it true or false, and then apply it to your condition. So ultimately, your computer is a calculator, period, right? Everything converts to a number, including your games, your text, your images, right? And it basically apply computing math to it. Okay, so we can test and run the program to see if it is going to output the correct result, right? You can test it with an odd or an even number. Any question? Yeah. But you notice that when you do the flag, you don't need extra curly brace, but you can add the curly brace as you need in the block of your if statement. Because it's already set to true or false, right? So the word is that some of the programming jobs now, when you solve the problem, they take your problem and match it with results from AI to see if it is equivalent or better, right? And that's what you see with a lot of the programming jobs. So if you're in the computer science area, you kind of have to understand, like, how can I solve the problem quickly and efficiently, right? And everybody looks at the problem with different approaches. So there are multiple ways to be able to solve a problem. And we build software to basically solve a problem. So yeah. So it's very similar to the example program. I just define a different variable. So when you're using a flag, always type it with a Boolean type, which is BOOL for the keyword. Okay, any question? So check your program. Now, languages like Python doesn't require type, so it's would be a slightly different approach in how because Python is intuitive. It actually identify whatever your data would be, right? And so C++ has a way to be able to implement flag variable like this for the compiler. So you see some languages would have different feature. Um, Okay, any question regarding exercise 2? So to understand this a little bit more, I recommend that you learn about binary decimal conversion. I go over many classes, even my networking classes, they just covered that. Because we need to be able to understand IP addresses, but yeah, so if you can understand more if you want to learn about binary and decimal conversion. If you want to do that outside of our lecture, I'll be happy to go over that with you, but there are a lot of tutorial based on that as well. So you can see why the least significant is 1, because when you have an odd number, that 1 is always going to be on. It's just the scale that's used to convert the number from decimal to binary. So if you have 11, that bit is on. But if you have 10, that bit is off. Okay. Okay, we only have 2 more to go. And then if you have extra time, if you want to work on your programming challenges, and if you need help, I'm here until class ends. Okay. So I put an explanation for your example, right? And your truth table. Now, a little different when we talk about logical operator, we'll talk about the others. Exclusive OR, in my experience, this is applied with a lot of encryption. So when you apply encryption algorithm, you often see exclusive OR being applied to the input value, whether it is numerical or letter, which is ASCII encoded. Okay, so once you have exercise 2 completed, make sure you run the program and add your screenshot. Since we talked about logical operator in C++, the double ampersand stands for the logical AND. You can use the keyword AND in capital and it will understand, but it is not in practice for C++. In Python, you can use the keyword AND you type out A and D, right? But in C++, to indicate that it is a logical and, you would use the ampersand. And in the condition, you often see that it uses the double ampersand for the logical and. Okay. So you can say something like, if the user is older than 18 and is a student, right, then that if that evaluates true, they might get a discount for something, or they might qualify for something. So you can use that to tie two conditions together, and they both have to be true when you're using logical and. It must be true, okay? Now, when you're using the logical or, you're going to use a double pipe symbol, and the pipe is shift and the key is above your enter key, and that's a logical or for C++. Now, when you're using an or, only one condition, so I can say 18 must be greater than 18-year-old or a student, right? So if I'm a student and I'm 22, that will still meet the or criteria, right? So the or allows you to have one condition, at least one operand is true. X is true or Y is true, okay? So the example here is, if the patient is coughing and if they have fever, right, the doctor will prescribe medication, for example. So when you're using an or, only one has to be true. And or is often used for people who have selected multiple options or even diagnosis like this, as you can see, right? And then the not is the opposite, and it only takes one input. So if your input is a 0, the output is going to be the opposite, which is a 1. So if the signal is off, when you not it, it turns on the signal, right? If you start with a 1, when you not it, it would be 0. So I would say that in certain cases, like if the weather, right, if it is raining, if it's not raining, then I don't need an umbrella, right? But in the case of decision making, you can say something like, if the container is not full, then fill the container. Let's say that we make an application for manufacturing, if they're building or creating certain products with container, for example. Okay. So it only requires one input for the not. That's the main difference. Now, I mentioned to you with exclusive or, right? It uses the or operator with so the XOR is a combination of two operator. And this is often used in a lot of things, including encryption, right? My experience with exclusive or is a lot. So you know about blockchain, right? You know about cryptocurrency? Cryptocurrency algorithm actually uses exclusive OR to be able to chain the pass of the key from one network to the next network. So that way it's more secured, supposedly, right? But you already know that cryptocurrency is breakable, right? So exclusive OR is applied quite a bit in cybersecurity applications and algorithm, and also regular application as well. Okay, so we see this example. It's going to check for the user income, the credit score, right? And if they have a job to qualify them for a loan. But you would see that it also used the bool operator, the bool type, and this is a flag variable that we saw in the last one, right? And a flag variable for qualifies. So it prompts the user to enter their income, record it into the income variable. It would prompt them to enter their credit score and store that into the credit score variable. And then it asks them if they have a job currently and store that into the flag variable. Then we would implement the condition if income is above a certain amount of money, right? If their salary is above $30,000 and the credit score is above 650, and if they have a job, then the bank will qualify them for the loan. Else, right, they would disqualify the candidate for the loan. So all you have to do is in the else, you would say qualifies false, and then we would apply the if condition for qualifies. So if they got approved, we would say congratulations, you qualify for the loan. Else, sorry, you did not qualify for the loan. And this goes for all kinds of loan, auto loans, home loan, personal loans, and this is what you see quite a bit with financial institution. Okay? So in this example, we use the and to tie all the conditions together, the criteria, to make sure that it is true. They must meet all three. So if you have many different conditions that needs to be met, then you just use the and operator. But if you only have one out of many, then you can use the or operator. Okay, so in this case, we use the and, which is the double ampersand. Okay, so the exercise we're going to do is something similar. We are going to provide 10% insurance discount. This is kind of what we did before similarly, right? 10% discount if they are 21 years and older, right? And they have 5 or more years of driving experience. So you're going to use the logical and to tie both of these criteria together to get the 10% discount, right? In your if statement. Okay. Any question regarding the exercise? You can look at the example and follow the template, or maybe I didn't do this one. I did do it. Okay, let me put this on to a platform that is easier to see. Sorry, just a double. Okay, so kind of like the example, I have the same header file for IOStream, and using namespace std is a must, so you don't have to type std for C in C out. In the main, I initialize a few variables. One is going to be the age. That is where we're going to check for criteria. 2 is going to be years of driving, and they're both integers, right? They're whole number. I have a bool qualifies like what you see in the example program. Then I prompt the user to enter their age, which is part of the A. And then I record that into the variable called age that I defined under main right here. Then I prompt the user to enter their years of driving experience and record that into years of driving variable, which I define here. And you can type it only once. If they're the same type, you can just use the comma as a separator for those variable. So those are the two things that we want the user to input, which is their age and their years of driving. Then after that, we are going to apply the logical operators to the conditional statement. We mentioned that the user has to be 21 years and older, or older, 21 years or older. And they have to have 5 or more years of driving experience. So So after you have your C in and C out to record the input, to prompt the user and record the input, you would put in your conditions. So I have if age is greater or equal to 21 and you would use the double ampersand. Years of driving is greater or equal to 5, and you put both of those inside the parentheses. Right? So the more condition you have, you keep adding on the and add that inside the parentheses. So if you require that they are a student, then you can add in there, but we would have to have an additional variable for that. And then we want to, similar to the loan program, we are going to check to see if they qualify or not, right? So qualifies is true, and the bool qualifies is already defined up here in the main function. And then else, so if they don't meet the criteria, right, we would inform them that they're not qualified. So qualifies is false. And then you want to display some kind of message to the user. If they qualify, right, then we're gonna congratulate them. You qualify for 10% insurance discount. Else, sorry, you do not qualify for insurance discount. Now, can you write this program without the flag variable? Sure, you can, right? With the if-else statement and just a logical operator. But if you use the flag operator, then you would apply the condition for it to output without nesting additional condition within. So if you don't use the flag variable, you have to probably nest it. Hello. So we can do more to the actual program, right? You can expand it to be able to, like I said, if you have more criteria, you just need to make sure that you add that in the condition here by tying it with the and. So both of these condition must be true to qualify. If one of them is true, so if I'm 21 years old, but if I've only been driving for 2 years, right, it's gonna go to the L the L section here, so I will get disqualified for the discount. And you see this with games, you see this with, so these type of logical operators can be applied in many different things as you see that, let's say if you're playing a game, if you have a certain weapon already, it needs to be able to check that, right? Or if you have certain number of coins so you can buy some kind of weapon, right? So it would be able to check that, right? So sorry, my return 0 got cut off at the bottom there for the bottom of the page. But after the else and the cout, you just do a return 0, have your curly brace, closing, and then you can run your program. So when I run this, I know some of you are still working on it. And I'll put the code back. So let's say if I put in my age or an age is 35, right? And then let's say that I'm going to make one of the condition faults. So if I've only been driving for 2 years, right? Yeah, it's going to go to the else. It's going to disqualify me. Now we can run it again. And we can say that if the user is 35 again, and if they've been driving for 7 years, so both of the criteria must be met when you're using an AND logical operator. Any question? Now, if you want to apply like, so in at higher level, we can also determine things based on also like probability. So insurance, they actually also look at your driving records and other things, right? And then they would predict like the rate based on also like zip code and other criteria. So in more of an advanced application for this type of things, right? You would see that sometime if you live in a different zip code, it might be cheaper for insurance. So how do they determine that? Well, they're looking at the statistic of the number of accidents in that area. And in some cases, you would apply probability with that to really determine, right, the rate of insurance for certain people. So and I tried to make it to real life applications so you can see, but you can use this technique for all different types of application. Any question? Yeah, so after this one, only one more. Hang in there, we're almost there. So as I mentioned, if you missed it at the beginning, right, I will have a midterm activated next week. I will try to put together some kind of review sheets for you to look over. It is multiple choice via Canvas, so it will turn on starting Monday or Sunday, and then you will be able to access it via Canvas. And the midterm covers chapter 1 through 4. And then you have another test called midterm 2 for the next 3 chapters. So, or 4 chapters. 4 chapters. So that will probably be later on. But we will still have to cover Unit 5 because we're slightly behind. So I'll try to keep it light so that way you can focus on your midterm a little bit next week. But don't forget that you need to do the programming challenges like Mr. McQueen requires. So as you submit them, I will grade them, right? So look at the chapter 4 programming challenges. If you haven't done the others assignments, right, take some time this weekend to complete them so that way you can get your grades updated. And I have posted scholarships in your announcements. You can find different types of scholarships, see if you qualify. Those are money opportunity for you as students, so. Okay. And then after the exercise, I'll record attendance and then we'll call it a day. You can stick around till the end of class to work on things or ask questions. Okay. Mhm. Thank you. Okay. Yeah,
There's some stuff at the top.
there you go. So yeah, just make sure you define the variable as you use that throughout the program. And the flag variable is always going to be bool type, Boolean. See how it captioned Boolean differently.
Wait, what do you mean caption?
Oh no, I was just looking at the text caption here. And on Canvas, you can click on grades, right? As an option to look at your grade report, or it also should be able to allow you to look at attendance as well. Okay, are we okay with exercise 3? Now we're gonna do the last one, right? Let's talk about that. So test and run your program. So this one is a little bit more lengthy, but it's cool because now you're gonna be able to do some kind of menu option. Switch statement is a way that we can implement many different options into the program using different block of code, but the key word is that you're going to use a switch, right? And for each of the option, you want to break out of that option. Otherwise, it would hang there. So, for example, I might have an ice cream parlor and I want to sell ice cream to the customer, and I have many different flavors like strawberry, vanilla, chocolate, etc., right? And we can implement this to show the menu to the users that way they can select the flavor that they want, right? And then from the selection, we'll be able to calculate the price and place that order into for the server to be able to provide them with the purchase, okay? So switch statement allows you to control your branch or your flow of your program by executing the different blocks based on the selection, based on a single expression. So if I select option 3 out of the 1, 2, 3, right, it's going to go to that block and be able to execute. Like if I select strawberry as a flavor then it's going to notify the server that I selected strawberry. And we want to be able to break out of each of the options using a break statement. And the keyword you're going to use is called break. It's going to terminate the execution for that switch block, right? And we want to do that so that way you don't have a fall through execution of your code because it's going to get stuck there, right? We don't want that. We want to move on in our application. So in this example, you are going to have everything inside the main. That's the only function. And I have a variable called choice, right? And I want to display the menu. So it is a simple menu. The first option is I want to say hi to the customer. So display greeting. The second option, I can display the date. And the third option is to exit the program. You should always allow the user or the customer to exit, or, you know, if none of the options is there. I hate it when I use a program and I don't want to select any of the thing they display. They don't give me another option or something outside of their selections. Okay. And, you know, this is for aesthetic. I saw that some of you submit the program to display, so you don't have to have the see out, but it's just conclude the menu that we have, right? Kind of because it's in console, so we kind of have to have a break in between. We want to prompt the user to select option 1, 2, or 3, and then record that into the choice. Now you're going to pass this variable into the switch statement. So your recorded input is going to be passed into the switch statement. Your expression here is then included in the parentheses. We would have case 1. If they type in 1, it's going to say hello, have a great day. And then we always want to have a break for each of our case. Okay, so you're going to have a break statement. Then case 2, we're going to display today's date and then break. So these options could be anything. It could be ice cream flavor. It could be t-shirts, different color that you're selling. It could be food, which is what we're going to be doing as for a restaurant, right? And then case 3, it's going to exit the program. Now, you might have 11, 12, 15 cases. It depends on how big your menu wants to be, right? So some restaurant, they might have 150 items on their menu. Then you're going to put all of those on there, right? Like, for example, you can make a menu for a coffee shop where they might have many different types of drinks on their menu. So each of the drinks can go into your case. So if a user order it online, right, they can type in the option that they want, right, and it will calculate the price, and then they can select the delivery date, for example, or the time, which is the next step, right? So here I only have 3 options in the menu, but you want to have a default. And in this case, we defaulted to an invalid input. I fat finger all the time, right? Like I intend to type number 3, but I press number 5 or number 4 next to it. And we only have 3 options. So if a user type in something that's not part of your list, you need to tell them to reselect, right? So the default should always be there, and you would prompt them that they have an invalid choice and they need to select the options that is given, which is 1, 2, 3 in the example program. And then we do a break. After that, we just do a return. Okay? Easy enough? So C++, this is how you do a switch statement. So in exercise 4, we are going to use the switch statement and a break statement. We are going to create or display the menu option for a restaurant, and you can have 3 to 4 options. That's up to you. We're going to implement the switch and the break statements for our menu options. And we're going to prompt the user to select from the menu. And we want to display their selection. It's going to end there, right? The more advanced program would be able to calculate the price, the tax, and then also allow them to set a schedule for delivery. And this is what you see with Instacart. Okay? All right. So after we're done, provide the screenshot, and then you just need to answer your question. What did you learn from doing these exercises? Okay, so I'll show you mine, and you don't have to use exactly what I had, right? It's your restaurant. You can just do whatever you want with it. Okay? Okay. So I have 4 options. So let me put this on Word so you can see better because our projector is bad. Okay, so at the top, same with all the other programs, have include IO stream, right? I'm not calculating prices, so I'm not using IO manip or IO manipulators in this case. I'm only doing like just the menu and the option input. So in the main, I have each choice, right? I put in the diner information. So I have a burger that's at $5.99, a pizza that's $8.99, and the salad that's $4.50, and the drinks is at $1.99. And you can do your pizza is probably more now, like $18.99. I was asking ChatGPT yesterday on the options, like what should I put that's common. That's why I put GPT Diner. So it tells me that pizza, burger, salads, and drinks are the commonly ordered items in fast food restaurants, right? So that's why I include. And then you don't have to have this line, okay? That's just for aesthetic. And then we want to prompt them to select 1 through 4. Right? So kind of like what you see in the example program, I just replace it with the food and its price. Now, in the future, you can use an array and then be able to loop and present as option because you don't want to type in 150 options when they have 150 items. You just have to be able to loop it for automation purposes. So then you are going to do the switch case. So choice 1 is going to be the burger. That's right here. We want to parallel that with our choices. Otherwise, people are going to get mixed up. So choice 1 is going to be our burger. So switch choice and then curly brace. We can indent to show our case. So case 1, just make sure that each case you're going to follow that with the colon. And then we're going to see out the option. After the see out, make sure you have a break statement, and then you would do the subsequent cases. Okay. So we have choice 1, burger. Your case 2 would be the next item that you presented. So that will be pizza. And then your salad would be the next case, right? So for each case, you're going to do the case and then the C out of you would present the user that will be pizza. You selected pizza and then break. And then you would do case 3. That will be your salad. Vargas, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So case 4 would be last one, which is your drink. So case 3 would be your salad. So you would say see out, you selected salad, and the price is $4.49. And always don't forget to include break for each of your case because you don't want to fall through for your program. So that way, if they type in 3, right, it would show that they have selected the salad. And then case 4 would be your drinks. Now, you know that restaurants don't just sell one drinks, they have many drinks. So sometime you would have a switch with a nested if else, right? Like if they select a drink, then you will prompt them what kind of drinks do you want? You want Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, you know, Sierra Mist, etc. So you would do an if, right? And then you would do the logical or for each of those. So you can add additional variety of things inside your switch as well. Also pizza, what kind of pizza do you want, right? Pepperoni pizza. So we can do an if with that, and then you would include like the type of pizza. Now, like I said, if you bury things too deep, sometimes that creates like delay for your program, but we have to look at how we would be able to solve it without having too many things nested. Okay. And then I have case 4, right, for my beverage, my drink. And you want a default option, right? So in this case, we have 4 options. So we want to remind the user that they need to type in 1, 2, 3, or 4. So it's only going to be 1 through 4 that they can select. And we're going to also break out of the default. So you should always include the default. And then lastly, return 0 and close your curly brace. And you would have the complete program. So later on, we're going to learn about arrays. So a different type of container, and we will be able to access each of the items through the array, and that will be a little different. So this is one way to solve it. Okay. So now you know how to create a menu using a switch statement with a break statement. Okay. Run your program. Like I said, Python doesn't have switch, right? Java and C++ does. So, and similar to C++, you're gonna see this in Java. Python, you just write, each of the cases will be a function or a method. That's what's called. So if you want more items on there, you can just keep adding the cases, right? Also keep a default. So when we test this program, so I see a menu option. So let's say if I select a burger, I type in 1 and it tells me you selected a burger and that's $5.99. Right? We should do something with that in the next level of the program is to take the selection, right? Bring that price down and then be able to calculate, add tax. If you have delivery fees, you would be able to add that, right? And then allow the user to schedule the time for delivery. For example, if you want like Uber Eats or things like that, that kind of app. So in my programming classes, usually this is one option that they can do for their project, right? To create a business application where people can select an option and then schedule their service or their delivery. But they, in Python and Java, they can use like a calendar that you can click, you know how you can set the date and time. So there's libraries that you can pull in to be able to set that. It's pretty cool. So once you do it, you're like, oh, that's how they make this type of application for Instacart or Uber Eats. Or you can even do like car wash service, right? A lot of my students, they turn that in to schedule their car wash. Okay, are we good? Do you have any questions? Don't forget to answer number 5, the takeaway that you have from today, right? We learn about switch statements to use that for menu options. And we always want to include a break statement with it. We can, we also need to include a default case or a default option. We also learned about the logical operators like the double ampersand for and both of the criteria when you're using an and must be true for that to execute in your condition or in conditional statement. We also learned about your flag variable, right? You saw that with the loan qualifications and insurance qualification for discount. And then we started with if, else, if statement, right? Okay, let me stop.